One way for you to exponentially increase your chances of landing a consulting interview is to first have informational interviews. In this video, I'm going to cover what informational interviews are, how to get them, and what questions to ask when you have them. So what exactly are informational interviews? Informational interviews are simply interviews that you conduct with someone who's doing a job that you want. For example, let's imagine that you want to work at Bain & Company. So what you might do is interview a consultant who works at the firm and ask them questions like, what is it like being a Bain consultant? Why did you choose Bain over other companies? So instead of them interviewing you, you have a chance to interview them and learn more about the company. There's a lot of advantages when it comes to having informational interviews. The first one is you get to learn about the industry. For example, if you're on the fence about whether or not you want to become a management consultant, having an informational interview, just even one informational interview, could save you weeks and months worth of applying for a job that you don't actually want. Second, you get to discover the firm. A lot of clients that I work with, sometimes they will interview with a firm that they thought they want to work at, but once they have an interview, they might realize, you know what, I actually don't want to work at this firm. And then vice versa, they might set up an informational interview with a firm that they just heard of for the first time, and after that informational interview, realize that, yeah, I want to be a management consultant, and I want to work at this firm. And the third advantage is that after the interview is done, if you keep in contact with the person who you had the interview with and do it the right way, you can actually earn a referral. That is, that person's going to refer you to the company. For example, if you wanted to work at McKinsey and you had an informational interview with someone at McKinsey who later on puts you a referral, all of a sudden your application gets moved to the top of the pile. So when McKinsey recruiters are going through all the applications for that month, they'll put yours at the top and review it because you came referred from someone who's already working at the firm. So now you can see the 3 advantages of having an informational interview. How do you actually get one? The easiest way is to go through your personal network and look at friends or connections who are currently working at the firm. For example, if you have a friend that's working at a firm that you want to interview at, set up an informational interview with them. The second way is to find alumni who went to the schools that you went to and set up an interview that way. So for example, there might have been someone who graduated from your university or your business school 5 years ago who's working at the firm right now. You might not know them now, but they're more likely to set up an informational interview. I know for a lot of clients that we work with at my consulting offer, this is a common approach that a lot of clients at my consulting offer take. The third way is to talk to representatives at the firm who are actually proactively trying to recruit people to their firms. So if you don't have friends or you don't have alums who work at the firms you want to, go and see if the firm is hosting an event. And if you're out of school, what you can do is reach out to representatives who are trying to recruit experienced hires, that is, people with working experience. You can often find these people on the website as well as on the newsletter. And the fourth way is that if you don't have friends, you don't have alumni, and you can't find representatives, it's just to go on LinkedIn and find someone who's working at the firm and reaching out to them. Ideally, you have a commonality. So for example, if you're both in Toastmasters, you can use that as a connection point. And then from there, set up an informational interview. This approach also works really well. So now that you have set up your informational interviews and it actually happens, what exactly do you ask on an information interview? Well, before I share with you my favorite 10 questions to ask, I'm actually going to go over what not to ask, so you have an understanding of the strategy behind the questions that I'm going to share with you later. There are 2 types of questions you should not ask. The first is what I call questions that fail the Google test. What this means is that information that you can easily find by just using Google. For example, what is a case interview? And when is Bain's next deadline? Those questions you can find online. So if your question can be Googled, don't waste the time of the person you're talking with, because these are questions that could easily be answered without them. And it shows that you didn't prepare for the informational interview, which means that you're unlikely to be a great consultant, which hurts your chances of getting a referral later with them. So don't do that. The second type of question you should not ask is anything that is negative. So for example, I wouldn't want to ask, what's the worst case experience you've had? Who's the worst manager? What's the worst thing about working at McKinsey? Those type of questions you definitely want to avoid. How do you know that you shouldn't ask questions that fail the Google test or bring up negative thoughts? So what kind of questions should you ask? So the questions you should ask instead are questions that show that you care about the person's experience and also puts them in a positive state of mind, so that when they answer the questions, it's more likely to lead to a richer conversation. They'll remember you, and later on they'll realize, I had a really good conversation with Davis. I think I'm going to refer him to work at Bain. So what do these questions actually look like? I'm going to share with you my list of 10 questions that I like to ask. You don't want to ask all 10 of these questions. In fact, even if an informational interview, you don't want to ask all these questions, because an informational interview could be as short as 10 minutes or it could be as long as 2 hours. So you want to use the questions appropriate to the time and use them as a place for you to start thinking about your own questions. The best questions are always going to be questions that you research and think about ahead of time based on the person. But I want to give you a starting point. So I'm going to share with you the 10 questions that I like to ask throughout my informational interviews. Question number 1. 1, what drew you to the management consulting industry? I like asking this question, especially if you're on the fence about management consulting, because you're going to hear from a perspective of someone else about how they chose to work in management consulting versus other industries. Question number 2, what's been your favorite case team to work on and why? This is probably one of my favorite questions just because it gives them a positive reference of mind because you're asking them about their favorite case. People love talking about their favorite project or favorite case that they worked on. Similarly, for example, if I ask you, tell me about your favorite teacher that you've ever had in your life, you probably have fond memories of that person. Same thing here. Third question, did anything surprise you about name a firm when you started working there? I like this question because it allows you to learn more about the firm than what you can learn on Glassdoor or a Google search or on the website. And in fact, you might be able to use this story later on in your interviews once you actually land them as well. So I like to ask this question from time to time. Question number 4, I noticed on LinkedIn that you worked in a particular office, on a particular case, or in what industry. Can you tell me more about that? This question requires a little bit of research, but this is me asking, for example, if they decided to specialize in oil and gas, why did they specialize in oil and gas? Or if they started in the New York office and transferred to the London office, I might want to know why they transferred. Number 5, how did you choose their field of specialization as your area of focus? So this question, I like to ask, especially if they've been working at the firm for many years, if they've specialized. So you'll find this in their LinkedIn profile usually that they specialize in a certain industry. And I like to go a little bit more detail into this. Number 6, what is the culture like at the firm in your office? So obviously you're going to fill in the firm and the office, but every firm and every office has a unique culture. And for this one, I like to learn more about it. For example, if you're considering working at Bain, for example, and you have informational interviews for 5 different offices, you can learn about the 5 different offices. So when it comes time for you to apply, you can actually rank the offices you actually want to apply to and which ones you don't. Like for example, let's say that you had an informational interview with someone from Bain Atlanta and Bain San Francisco, and you realize you really like the Bain Atlanta office, then you might rank the Bain Atlanta office higher. Number 7, how much opportunity have you had to interact closely with senior level consultants? I like this question because it does 2 things. One is that it shows you the culture of the firm itself. So for example, do older consultants mentor younger consultants? And second, oftentimes the person who you're interviewing will give you stories of mentorship advice that they've gotten. So you, by definition, also get this mentorship as well. So I like this question to be used, especially when I'm trying to pick the brain of someone who I look up to and someone who they look up to. Number 8, what's been the biggest lesson you've learned in consulting? I love this one because again, it puts them into a positive state of mind and thinking about how much they've grown as a consultant since they first joined the firm. Number 9, what advice do you have for someone from my background to prepare for a career in consulting? I like to ask this question because they might have a unique approach, especially if you share a similar background. For example, you went to the same university, or maybe you went to the same varsity sport, or you had the same club, or you come from a similar upbringing. I like to ask this question in case they have advice for me in my situation. Number 10, who's been your favorite manager to work for? As consultants, we rotate through projects a lot. And oftentimes you're going to find managers you really like and managers you really don't like. And this puts them in a positive frame of mind, but also to me shows the type of managers I could potentially have if I worked at this firm in this particular city. So I like to ask this question. It's not my favorite on it, but if there's extra time, I like to ask this question. So these are 10 questions that I like to use. Again, use these as a starting point. The best questions are those that you can tailor depending on who you're talking with and the flow of the conversation. So don't go in there with a script, just go in there knowing that this could be used as a baseline, but come up with your own questions as well. So now that you've had the information interview, you need to be thinking, how do I keep this relationship going? How do I turn this potential informational interview into an actual referral that lands me an interview with the firm? The best and easiest way for you to stay in touch is to, well, stay in touch. And I like to do 2 things. The same day that I have the information interview, I like to email the person just to thank them for their time because they gave up a portion of their time to be with me, to interview with me, and to give me information when they could have been working on their project. And the second thing I like to do is after the initial email is I like to implement the advice that they give. For example, they said, hey, you should probably check out this team. Take that advice, follow up with them, and tell them that you took their advice, because as consultants, we love it when people take our advice. That's why we become consultants, right? We give advice to our clients and then we hope that they implement it. And so you could be a great candidate for a consulting role by just following up and following the advice. There's been so many informational interviews that I took when I was at Bain and the person never followed up. As in, I think I have a great informational interview with them. I've actually given them a referral, but I never hear back from them. So the best way for you to do it is just to stay in touch. Don't overthink it. Stay in touch, keep them posted on what you're doing. Finally, apply to the consulting firm, ask them for a referral, and make it easy for them to provide a referral. So there you have it. Now you know about information interviews and how to make the most of them so you get closer to landing an actual interview. But I'm not done helping you yet. The first thing I want to do is actually help you even more. I actually have resources, they're free, that will help you land interviews at various firms. All you have to do is comment below the name of the firm and the city that you're applying to. So for example, if you're trying to apply for BCG New York, type in BCG New York below, and I'll send you more resources to help you get closer to landing that BCG New York or whatever office and whatever firm that you list below. Secondly, if you want to learn more about how to actually land interviews at the top consulting firms like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, Deloitte, Accenture, I actually have a free training that I put together with my team. So this training has helped over 800 people land consulting offers, and this training is completely free. It was built by former McKinsey, Bain, and BCG recruiters, interviewers, and consultants who want to make sure that you have everything you need in order to land interviews. In order to access that free training, I'll provide a link below in the description. All you have to do is click the link below and you'll be able to learn more about how to land interviews at consulting firms. Again, the best news is that this resource is free and it could be the free training that helps you land that offer at your dream firm. But you don't have to take my word for it. Actually hear from Charmaine, who was able to take this free training and then had informational interviews at McKinsey and BCG, and a few weeks later landed her offers. Again, you don't take my word for it. I'm actually going to link to Charmaine's video somewhere above my head so you can actually hear her story about how she was able to use an informational interview to eventually get her offer. All right, I'll see you in the next video.